So just to reset, I'm Derek Lucas from Jazz 90.1, obviously you're here, and this is our first class of Jazz 90.1 University. And again, we can't thank you enough, and so I got to do a little plug that. Our pledge drive is coming up in March, late March, early April, to start Jazz Appreciation Month, but you don't have to wait until then. So if you want to join the station, we'll gladly accept a humble donation. Or better yet, come on down to our next big party, which happens on February 29th. We'll be celebrating Sadie Hawkins Day, Mardi Gras style. It's also Leap Year Day, so it's going to be at the Barnard's at Party House. It's 360 Main Lane down the street, right by the police station there. And it's New Orleans theme night, Mardi Gras, so we'll have beads, we'll have costumes and feathers and blues and jazz and dancing, you know, New Orleans style, and the food too. So again, it's $35, and it goes to a great cause, us and these guys. Speaking of these guys, you might know these young brothers. Once upon a time. That's Gap, of course, and Chuck, circa 1960.
Wow.
Yep. They played sock hops, they did schools, they went everywhere. And they still do. They still do it. And once in a great while, you might see Chuck, because he's back here now. You can hear that from me. So if you're at Wegmans, you're thinking, I know that guy in the hat. Because you do know that guy in the hat. So he pops up in an interesting place. That we saw him at Fairport. His brother was doing a big band show at the park. All of a sudden, people were looking around like, nah, it couldn't be. Yep. So it's great having Chuck back around the area. So we left with a question. Which came first, Eastman or jazz in Rochester? Well, Eastman started in 1921. So next year they celebrate their centennial. But Eastman really didn't recognize jazz. They still thought, someone said, it was the devil's music. It was bastardized. It was, those other people make that music. People who really you don't want to have at dinner with your mom, with your girlfriend. So for many, many years, although obviously people played jazz at Eastman, they really wasn't recognized as a jazz program until the 1960s. So obviously Chuck Mangione came through there, Ron Carter, and dozens and dozens of others, but really until the first 50 years of its existence, it was like, those people make that music. So, to answer your question, jazz came first. Eastman eventually got around to it and supported it, and obviously it's a world leader today in jazz education. But back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, you remember what jazz was thought of back in those days? It was, although we're the roaring 20s again, it was the music of the bootleggers. And speaking of bootleggers, so how many of you have heard of Marge's? Well, I found out once upon a time, it's on the lake, sand, there's a reason. I didn't realize it was once upon a time a bootlegger bar. So, there you go. Now I told you, as I was sitting on the beach one night, realizing this could have been a bootlegger bar, and someone said, because it was. There you have it. And even the basement today, it's still sand, which, there you go. So, more interesting Rochester history. So the Eastman School of Music with Howard Hanson and William Warfield, but really not until the advent of a couple of folks. Charles Frank Mangione, when he came to school in 1959, Gap, who went to Syracuse, they really started to get and Ron Carter, the three of them along with Noel Cohen, really helped put the jazz word on the map at Eastman. So that people realize that this is a serious music that can be studied. So once that started happening, and all of a sudden people realized that also the Eastman School of Music could also get students to come to Rochester to study this and make a career of it. And all of a sudden they have places to play. So you talk about Eastman's impact, Mangione's, Ron Carter, Rick Braun, Jeff Tyzik, Ray Wright. Yep. And Ray Wright actually is the one, because they brought Ray Wright in. He was instrumental because these were all kids, but what Ray Wright did, and there's a room named after him, he was really, there's always that, that professor or teacher who not only is your teacher, but also helps you get your first job. He goes the extra mile. That was Ray Wright. And so many careers were started because of Ray Wright, because not only would he teach them, he'd also place them into careers in music, which is no easy feat. So even Jeff Beal, people like that, Maria Schneider, will all come through the walls of Eastman School of Music at 26 Gibbs Street. And then there's this guy from Irondequoit, Steve Gadd, one of the most recorded drummers in the history of music. But he started as a jazz musician. Actually, before that, he was on the Mickey Mouse Club. So if you go on YouTube, this clip's still there on YouTube. So you see Annette and all the little people, you'll see little Stevie playing drums. So his career started as a child star back in the 1950s. But as a child prodigy, he was allowed to play in clubs as long as he didn't drink. So he was a little kid, so you'd see him at Doug Duke's or the Pt.2, any place there was live music heard, his parents would bring him there, and he would play there. All the way up until then he was drafted into the military, did his 2 years of service. And when he came back, people promised that he'd have a job, and they held the promise. He had work right away. Yeah, so he's a member of the Rochester Music Hall of Fame, and rumor has it he might be joining the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a sideman. So, now with Steve Gadd, obviously one of the nicest guys in the world, and he works still about 300 nights a year. So we were trying to do an interview with him, and he said, "I'll try best I can. I'm busy. I've got a job." The job was Prince Harry's wedding. I'm sorry, wrong wedding. Prince William's wedding. So Eric Clapton, he was in Eric Clapton's band at the time. He did the interview. I'm like, we can wait. But he felt so indebted to the community. He still does. Every time he comes here and goes on the air, he gets emotional about how much he loves the city and what it's done for him. And so, which also is really remarkable, one of his teachers is still alive, and she would come visit him. She's in her 90s, and she still calls us, and she still visits him, and Mrs. Horton, one of her longtime members. So it's kind of cute seeing one of his old teachers still come through and support him, but it's really cool that Steve does that for us. That's how much love he has for the community and for us here. Another Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and Rochester Music Hall of Famer is this guy. He grew up in the Cornhill district of Rochester. His name is Pee Wee Ellis. Best known for his work with James Brown and with Van Morrison. He's still with Van Morrison, 40 plus years later. But he's also a member of the Rochester Music Hall of Fame. He grew up in the Cornhill area, Closter Street, Troop Street, Atkinson Street, that area, the home of the Pt.2. That's where he cut his teeth, and that's where he, along with Chuck and Gap, Ron Carter would play. The aforementioned Alec Wilder, the song I couldn't think of was "I'll Be Around," the big Tony Bennett hit he wrote, among others. So again, when we woke, actually spent the balance of the evening talking about the musicians who made such an impact. So he grew up in the Park Avenue area. So he's written a couple of amazing books about Rochester back in the 20s and 30s, especially the Park Ave area. The book was called Letters I Never Sent. And it's just talking about just growing up in Rochester and seeing all the streets and hearing about them and just what it was like as a kid. It's really remarkable what led him to his career in writing music, and also the Eastman School of Music. Another Rochester Music Hall of Famer is this man, the most recorded jazz musician of all time. His name is Ron Carter. He has something close to 5,000 recordings and counting. He grew up in Detroit and then came to Rochester back in 1955. So Rochester is still racially segregated, although not as bad as it was down south, but still, he was dealing with racism in the world of Eastman because they weren't welcoming the black students to jazz musicians. So he was trying to go as a classical musician, and he was told that he wouldn't find work. And they tried to push him out, nicely, gentleman agreement thing back in the 50s. He refused because he loved the city that much. He found friends here, he found roots here, and he stayed and battled through and graduated. And so, but for a long time, the relationship was pretty acrimonious between Eastman and Ron. But someone pulled out the olive branch a few years ago, and when he was inducted into the Rochester Hall of Fame. So he came back. So it was a pretty momentous occasion when he came back, and walking through, and he was sitting in the bench, the very bench where they tried to throw him out of school, the very bench where he was told he wouldn't have a chance. And there he was being honored by that same school and by the city. So you can imagine what he was going through. But again, the reason why he stayed here is because of of the relationships he made here in Rochester. And then I think things worked out. After he graduated, he moved to New York, worked with Miles Davis, Roberta Flack, and literally hundreds and hundreds of others. So if you turn around the album, you look at the personnel, chances are you'll see Ron Carter on bass. And he still comes to Rochester. He still comes back to all the reunions. But a tremendous talent in the gentleman. Another musician in the Rochester Music Hall of Fame is this guy. East High graduate, Joe Locke. So Joe Locke came through the early 1970s when he had the cap sideways. He'd play at Martin Luther King Park in the old Jazzmobile days. So some folks might remember the Jazzmobile, where in those days, because of urban renewal, jazz clubs across the country were closing down. So to continue to play, some folks had a great idea. If we just took out a flatbed truck and traveled across the country, where families can now hear us play in parks, we can make money, we can keep working. That's what they did. And along the way, they would find local kids who could play jazz and give them a chance. Joe Locke. So, and this worked for a number of years, because the Jazzmobile folks would work with county and state governments in their park system. Set up a park, have a jazz band. It was real simple, and it was pretty amazing. And that's how he was discovered.
We got to see Horace Silver here in Gallery on Jazzmobile.
That's right, Horace Silver played the jazz. This guy, back in the 1950s, I doing the research, I completely forgot he was born and raised here. Who is it? Mitch Miller, that's right. Rochester guy.
Bird with Strings.
That's right, Bird with Strings. What was the TV show called? It was called Sing Along with Mitch. So America learned how to sing all the pop songs with Mitch. So another early Eastman School graduate, I think he's in the second class of Eastman School. And of course, Mitch Miller went on to, incredible success, really teaching America how to sing pop the right way. He, along with his other classmate, his name was Goddard Liebertson, who ended up running Columbia Records for many, many years. We're all bandmates and schoolmates. And of course, as you said before, he was also a jazz legend because he was also an instrumental part of Charlie Parker's With Strings album. And he helped Charlie Parker get to a larger audience by having him play behind strings, behind an orchestra. And all of a sudden people heard Bird, that was Charlie Parker's nickname, in a whole nother light, and introduced him to a whole other audience because of Mitch Miller. This guy, Jimmy Highsmith Jr., was just recognized a few years ago by the city of Rochester for his contributions to music. And Jimmy he's in his early 50s, but still, as the Rochester local scene was starting to wind down, he was instrumental in bringing it back and getting people playing again, getting young people playing again. Just not jazz, but music in general. What had started happening in the 80s, music programs started leaving schools, especially the city school district. And so kids weren't learning how to play music. We take it for granted. If you grew up, you learned an instrument, went through music class, as you know. Some school districts were, because of funding, lost it. Jimmy was instrumental in making sure that kids had access to instruments. And he still works with. So during the festival, something he helped start, each day of the festival, people will always ask for people to donate instruments, guitars, saxophones, trumpets, whatever, because still a large number of kids want to play music, but can't, because their parents can't afford it. But because of people like Jimmy Highsmith, he was able to make sure that kids at least have access to music and an instrument. And so we honor Jimmy with his contributions to music here in Rochester. Another person you may not have heard of, but he's heard and known around the world, from Fairport. He's a 3-time Downbeat Magazine Jazzman of the Year. Downbeat Magazine is the principal trade magazine for jazz. From Fairport, his name is Vijay Iyer. A Red Raider from Fairport. You might know his other classmate, Philip Seymour Hoffman. He graduated 2 years ahead of him, so how's that for some pretty talented kids? But Vijay grew up here. His family's still here. His parents are still here. And his grandparents are still here. So he's played the festival a couple of times, but his name is one of the most universally recognized names in the world in jazz. And they always credit to Rochester and the school system at Fairport, and Bill Tiberia was his teacher. So wherever he goes around the globe, he always talks about Rochester, what a great place it is, and people should visit it and check it out. So,
What was his last name?
Vijay Iyer, I-Y-E-R.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, he's pretty remarkable as well. This young lady, Maria Schneider, last year she became the youngest woman ever to be inducted into the Jazz Hall of Fame. And she got her start here in Rochester as an Eastman School graduate, undergraduate, and got a grad degree here as well. And again, she's one of the most universally recognized arrangers and conductors in the world today. But she always credits Rochester. She came along, her class had Jeff Beal, Dave Ravello, people like that, through Ray Wright, under his auspices. I mean, I've got, and just to think about some of the other folks, Mike DiMartino, let's see, the Nodos, Sam and Joe Nodo, Wayman Reed. We could talk about people like Pee Wee Ellis, we mentioned before, who passed away today, Joe Santora from Cabo Frio, bands like Sal Nistico, Joe Romano, the Salzano brothers. I mean, there's so many amazing musicians, Barry Kiner, Terrence Blanchard, Terrence Bruce. You think about the musicians that come through here, Joe Mancuso. I mean, you could go all day. Al Bruno, who's still performing at 98.
Wow.
In his 90s, still going strong. So again, people like that, that's what makes Rochester really a special place. Frank Polera, Phil Flanagan, Bob Snyder, Mike Melito. So again, you can still see great jazz every night of the week. Now we have to work a little harder to get to it, but it's still there. There's still places like Villager Soleil in Pittsford. They're doing jazz. It seats about 20 people, but it's great. It's like old school. It's like the old days. Where you go into a little tiny place, you find your little nook, you find your little cranny, glass of wine, great jazz, press repeat. Can't go wrong. Also, a new place just popped up on State Street, actually near the old Squeezers. It's called the Spirit Room. I liked it because all of a sudden, my favorite beer growing up was Schlitz. And they had a Schlitz beer sign. So I'm like, this has got to be a place. The reason why I like Schlitz is a side point here, because back in the 70s, now I can't believe I just put this together. So my grandmother and grandfather, there was like a zillion kids that were babysitting at the time. They were a big family, so there were maybe like 7 to 10 kids at any given time. Lunchtime, of course, we get our mini raviolis. And after lunch, it's grandpa time. We can sit on the porch, and they give us these little 8-ounce ponies. Schlitz ponies. We thought it was the coolest thing in the world, getting to drink with grandpa. And then there we go, it was nap time right after that. We never connected those things together for years. For years. We just like, wow, why did we always, oh my word. We just a couple sips, we just thought the greatest thing in the world, we hang with grandpa. Not remember anything else after that, but anyways, I've always preferred to take up to Schlitz, because when you have a Schlitz, you're out of beer. So again, this is really what it's about in terms of bringing people together in a way that nothing else can and does, and it's jazz. That's why we wanted to honor the folks who made it happen, especially because without you, there wouldn't be any jazz in Rochester at all. So again, we can't thank you enough for coming out tonight and hanging out with our first class. Now, that being said, I want to open up to thoughts and comments what you have in terms of what you think.
So what about the record stores?
The record stores, you know what? You think about the house guitars,
Bop Shop,
Bop Shop,
Tom Cohen.
Record Archive. Record Archive celebrating its 45th anniversary this year. And I remember I bought my first record at, none of those places actually. The first record I ever bought was at Sibley's. Remember Sibley's? And B. Foreman's? So again, places like that. And Rochester's pretty unique because of the record stores, because it's just not going into a record store, the old brick and mortar places. They're still popular because although you have Amazon and you have places you can just click a button and get when you want it, record stores are places where you get together and meet people who are like you.
Well, and especially at the Bop Shop, Tom puts on a lot of concerts.
Yeah. So that was one of my first jobs. I worked at the Bop Shop. I didn't realize it was a job at the time because my mom he was one of my babysitters. So Tom Cohen, Armin was one of my babysitters. So what happened, they would just drop me off as a child and let me at it, and I put records away. And for Tom, when I was a little boy, like 12, 13 years old, or maybe Armin had the house guitar, so I was a little boy putting CDs away. I think it was the coolest thing. They got free labor. Now I think about it. And same with the record archive as well. So again, this is one of the cool things about record stores.
Did Cab Calloway ever actually perform here in Rochester? I know he was born here.
He did at a place called the Stardust Ballroom, which still is in existence. It's still around near Brown Street.
Okay.
So yeah, he did actually come here and play here. Somebody mentioned it before. Back in the Eastman days, they were one of the first shows they would bring on, and for many, many years, on New Year's Eve, some folks might remember, Preservation Hall would end the year at Eastman, and they were one of the first jazz bands to play at Eastman. That was a tradition on New Year's Eve. Preservation. Also, Duke Ellington was a popular person here in Rochester. Oftentimes, and I just found out, but apparently back when he first started coming here in the 40s and 30s, still he couldn't stay in hotels. And then folks at, you might remember, the National Clothing Company, I want to say, downtown, the owners heard about Duke's plight, and he would have Duke and the band stay with their families. And so, he struck a relationship, so he also would use their clothes as well. But it was just kind of cool that Rochester would be that welcoming, because it was a dangerous thing back in those days.
There was a Preservation Hall tradition. They had a party afterwards, began after the show up in Greece.
Really?
With a family here. They came every year for years. And they, play piano, but the rest of it was just sitting around talking.
Yeah, a true after party.
I miss the Arrangers holiday so much.
Oh yeah.
And I know that not all of it was for jazz. The first half of it was a real expression of having all these people do master classes in arranging. But the second half, we saw Monte Alexander, we saw Oscar Peterson, we saw, U.B. Blake may have been in one of those, but we saw some amazing, amazing artists as a result of it.
So you right here, that Arrangers Holidays back in the 60s and 70s, even the 50s, Eastman, through Ray Wright, would organize these holidays for major jazz musicians and composers on summer vacation, and they would write and they compose, but they would record those shows. But the thing is, they sat in vaults for 50 years. Thanks for the plug on that. So on Wednesday nights, we wrote a deal with Eastman that we're now recording, we're playing those now.
Oh, awesome.
So Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock, we have this show called Jazz at Eastman, past, present, future,
Okay.
where we played the old shows from Arrangers Holiday. Chuck Mangione shows as a student. Steve Gadd shows as a student. And they're amazing, they're fantastic. So you hear all these amazing musicians as kids.
And they were rich in musical jokes because part of the format was, how do you arrange something that sounds like the Olympic theme? How do you arrange something that sounds like the James Bond thing? And so there were certain things that they had to, or Strauss Waltz. I've never heard so many pregnant pauses in my life. They would just milk it for everything it was worth.
It was
And
fun.
the audience loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah, so that's just one of them. Also, Dave Brubeck recorded a live album with the Eastman School of Music, which I didn't realize. His last interview with us, we're asking, so Dave, is it like for us to play? Yeah, play the Elementals. Like, what's that? You don't know what that is? Like, no, Dave, I don't. What is that? That's the thing I did with Eastman. Dave, so I dug through the library and go, well, we had it. So I put it on, flew off the turntable, and yeah, we had two turntables, by the way, for moments like that. And we played it like, there you go, kid. So, yeah. Anyways, it was with Ray Wright. So they did the whole orchestra with Dave Brubeck. It's pretty cool. Any other thoughts? Any reminiscences from Rochester? I'll go all night. In the back there, Marie.
There was a club on, the one in St. Paul, and I don't remember the name of the other street, it goes to a bridge over the river, and there was a club there for a while, it was really good.
Water
I don't know if it was eighties or nineties.
I think that's
Water
the post
Street
office.
Grill.
Marie, what time, what period are you talking about?
That, I don't remember if it was like in the nineties or eighties or.
St. Paul, I'm trying to think. I think there was a triangle. There was also Stone Street, where Joe Locke used to play all the time.
The Water Street Grill.
Water Street Grill.
It was really good.
Yeah, so there's been some amazing spots. Also, the German House for a number of years did jazz back in the 80s and 90s. Scorgies.
And Elvis Costello there.
That's right. Oh yeah, Scorgies. So a lot of times, they still do put jazz in the bug jar, we still play jazz. It's kind of funny, when you're starting multi-use bands or multi-use places, you think of rock clubs or punk clubs, all of a sudden they'll sneak a jazz show in, because the owners of the club love the music, so they go, let's just do it, and see what happens. You never know, you might get another clientele. And that's what really Rochester has done over the years, even before the festival came. We had swing and jazz, incorporating also our own shows here back in the 90s here at the station, back at our old location. We used to do shows there. And also you think about even Clarissa Street where you saw the Pt.2 reunions happen there. So there's always gonna be jazz. I mean, the festival now is going almost 20 years strong, but yet it started long before the festivals happened because of people supporting the music. And I mean, you think about, was it Eddie's Chop House? That was a spot back in the day, you'd have live jazz.
Well, the university also with ringing acts, and so I saw Jackie Jeanette Special Edition.
Oh, yeah.
Strong Auditorium.
Right.
You saw Robert Glasspiegel at the chapel.
Yeah.
That was a great show.
Yeah, another one, Robert Glasper, his family, which I forgot. He was born here. He's from here originally. So Robert Glasper, yeah, his grandparents are still here. So, two-time Grammy Award winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's from here. So, yeah, just we think about these ties because they're national artists, but they're from here. And their ties are here. Their grandparents are still here, which is pretty cool. I just remember, hi, Kat.
Derek, when you were talking about the different musicians, you touched on one that wrote a book about letters I never sent.
Yeah,
Who was that artist?
his name is Alec, A-L-E-C, Alec Wilder.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Thank
go on.
you.
Another cool book, if you can find it, is The Hammer Conspiracies. It talks about the mob days in Rochester. But I love the book because it talks about all the clubs in Rochester, that even the addresses. If you go to all these addresses in Rochester, you can actually detail all the old days from the 70s, from 70 to 73, 74. And it's cool, you can literally just do a map of all the old music clubs in Rochester, whether it's jazz, rock, blues, and because they're all music fans. But they literally took the time to write the addresses down of all these classic places. So just for a tour of Rochester's music scene of the early 70s, it's called The Hammer Conspiracies by Frank Alloy. So that's some more reading for you. So again, with Rochester, again, time and time again, you can go find places that you think, wow, how did this happen? It always happened because people have loved the music so much, and they're willing to sacrifice whatever they could. I think of Susan Plunkett's Fabulous Foods, and she's closing on hitting her 8th decade. But you know what? The passion she has for this music is incredible. And she still says, although she lost everything she had with Jazzberries and Milestones, she'd do it all over again. No regrets. She'd do it all over again. And she'll work to the day she can't work anymore, literally. But because of the music she heard in that place, that she was able to bring in, like Dizzy Gillespie, his last time in Rochester was because of her. Or Sun Ra, because of her. I mean, you think about Etta James, things like that. People like that. And so you realize the passion people have for this music, what they were willing to do for this music. So that's why that's why we honor it every day. That's why we make sure we let folks know that these folks are from Rochester. We're proud of it. They're proud of it. Maria Schneider, the world's most famous opera singer, came up as a jazz singer. She put herself through Eastman singing jazz. Renee Fleming.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I said Maria, I meant Renee Fleming, yeah. I mean, her parents taught in the area, but Renee Fleming came up as a jazz singer. So it's kind of cool hearing when she flips into her jazz voice. She sings actually 2 octaves lower. The world's most famous soprano, but you couldn't tell because she's got this really dark, husky voice, which puts her jazz voice on. Other thing that's funny is we were interviewing her, and you know Renee Fleming, but when we talk to her, she flips also her Rochester accent on. So it's like, hi, Derek, it's Renee. How are you doing? Renee? Yeah, Derek, it's me. I'm like, so, these folks who are famous from around the globe still love to tout that this city is something special to them. Something we take it for granted. I do. And then until I hear people in New York or people in Austin, Texas, or people in Newport say, how's things in Rochester? Remember the Pt.2? Or Jinx and Jones or Salt and Pepper. I'm like, wow, they remember. Of course we remember. I called, a few years ago, I had a chance to talk with Sonny Rollins, the saxophone colossus. He said, so Rochester. Oh, Sonny also, Rochester. Rochester. Oh yeah, the bandbox. That was 60 years ago. Oh, I remember it. Easter Sunday, 1956. I was there. They remember like that. But again, it just gives you an idea what the city meant. They can remember Easter Sunday from 60 years ago. It gives you an idea. So again, never take it for granted when you hear great jazz or great people or people around in a certain area. And so just because it gives you an idea of the passion people have for this music, just not the musicians, but also the audience. Jazz is one of the few things where there's no wall. You go to a show, there's the performer, there's you. You go hear them, you hear them sing, you go home, they go home. Not in jazz. You go there early, they hang out with you before the show. You watch them perform. After the show, they hang out with you. Usually you have to go home before they do. Because they're normal working people. A lot of these folks have straight day jobs still. Like Wes Montgomery, legendary guitarist, still worked as a TV repairman. So again, time and time again, folks, that you can see it at Star Market, or Tops, or Bell's, or Wegmans, or Dawes Drugs. Yeah. So again, it just goes to show you, just like, these are people who not only create art, but are with you.
What's your relationship with the school district here? I'm new to the area.
Oh, sure. The station got started by kids back in 1973, and they started as a way with their teacher to get involved with the community. So Greece Monroe community, that's WGMC. So they started the station as kids. They played jazz music, prog rock, and fusion. And so the first class came through, and second class came through, and then the kids kind of lost interest in the station. So they turned it over to the community, and waiting for the kids to get back into it again. Some kids did, like this one, 30 years ago. But we found a way to get the kids back involved. For years we tried, how can we get the kids back involved? And all of a sudden we realized, let's try it through the music program. Jackpot. So now the kids write and produce shows about what's it like to be a teenager now in 2020. How they deal with online bullying, how they deal with race, how they deal with gender issues, everything. But through jazz, how jazz gets them through it. So they'll actually find artists like Nina Simone or Duke Ellington or Count Basie, they'll find, or Charles Mingus or Miles Davis, and they'll find a particular title of music, and like, yeah, that's the one that helps me get through it. And we're like, how do you know about these people? They do. Because the other thing with lots of kids, the way they're learning about this music is through big bands, big band arrangements. So they're learning about these artists through big bands. And so they come to the studio, they produce the show. It's like 20 kids, they each have their own little 2 to 3 minute segment. They play the song, and they talk. And for them, it's therapeutic because the whole purpose of the station is to bring people together, especially kids in high school. You're talking about athletes, you're talking about artists, people who are invisible. But for that hour, they're together. And they mentioned it, and it doesn't get past it. They realize that after that class, they probably won't speak to each other. And before that class, they don't speak to each other, but during that class, they do. So we're back to the original mission of the station, the kids involved. Thanks for asking that.
Very interesting.
Can you tell me about how Marion McPartland had her connection with Rochester? I've always heard her radio show, and I knew that she admits that when she's struggling with a piece, she sends it to the Eastern kids so that they can transcribe it, transpose it. She said they're the best in the business. But I didn't know that based on that photograph, that she had this other whole relationship with us.
Yeah, her manager was Tom Hampson, the lawyer, was a longtime attorney and manager. And before that, she was also friends with Will Moyle. That's where the friendship started. So back in the 50s, Will would see her in New York, and then she'd play here for, again, 3 or 4 times a year, a week at a time. So,
It's like a master class.
yeah, so they would hang out 3 sets. Well, but in those days, people played 3 sets a night. So you start at 9, you're done by 2 a.m., sometimes 2:30 a.m. 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week. So because of that, you build friendships and networks, literally. So not only are you doing master classes, you're in the community. So with that, with Marion, that's how she was able to build such deep roots here in the area. So that's how she found her manager, possibly a second husband, give or take. So again, but again, if she had issues, she would reach out to friends like Ray Wright or Tom Hampson or Alec Wilder. Same with Miles Davis. Miles Davis wrote in his autobiography about how the owner of the Ridgecrest Inn helped him out of a major jam, and I don't want to know what jam it could have been, but somehow he called to his friend in Irondequoit, the owner of the Ridgecrest Inn, who was one of the first female jazz club owners. Her name was Jane Morey, and it bailed him out. Rich Donuts. Yes, ma'am.
I remember a club, I think it was called the Impulse, but I'm not exactly sure. It was on Court Street or on Court Street. It
You are
was
correct.
like where Xerox is now, somewhere in that area. I think it was called the Impulse, but I'm not exactly sure.
Yep,
It wasn't-
Impulse
I don't
and
think it was
Shakespeare.
involved, a club too long.
Yeah. You have a couple spots. Impulse, which also became the Shakespeare.
Okay.
So, and also the other spot around that time was called the Clinton Rail. Both were, the Mangione Brothers was one of their early business ventures, and they were able to bring John Coltrane in. But yeah, the Shakespeare, the building's still there, so if you go to Xerox, you see the little underground part,
Yeah.
that was a jazz club.
Yeah.
It's a
I
little
remember
underground
that.
basement jazz club. So if you walk past, it's still there, but once upon a time.
Okay.
That's really, again, it goes back to, so just the thoughts that, oh, the clubs come and go, the people stay. And the memories stay, as you saw with the clip about the pit thought.
Yeah.
And again, all the festivals coming up in June, there's still things people can do in terms of going out and seeing live music. That's why we're here. We always want to promote that people can go out and have these great experiences now, still. And you still can. So anytime there's live music going on, especially live jazz, there's just something special about it because you see people you won't see anywhere else. And also, the other thing that's happening that's big again is swing dancing. If you go to any of the swing dance shows, this place called Groove Juice, it's a swing dance network, and they're at the German House every Wednesday night, generally like $5. You can watch the kids swing dance like they did back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Poodle skirts, the whole works, even the music. And it's cool to watch them dance, and people get really into it. And they know all the artists, Cab Calloway, they know Count Basie, they know old school Frank Sinatra, pre-Fedora Frank, Glenn Miller. And they're into it, they know the artists. So it's kind of great seeing that. So again, that happens on Wednesday, so just if you love music, you love watching, if you like to dance still, or you love watching people dance. Again, I think the cover charge might be $5. Yeah. At the German House, it's the German House, and it's next to it. Yes, sir.
Back to Marion Department, she was good friends with Squeezer.
Ah, Joe Squeezer.
His name's Joe Squeezer.
Ah,
Every time she was in town, even after long after we came to clubs, they would always get together for dinner at Joe's house.
very cool.
You wanna know how he got the name Squeezer? I just happen to know, because he's my uncle.
My uncle.
He was a young man. He was as fat as my finger, and he loved to box. Imagine that, and he was a very fine pianist also. Now, a piano player and boxing really don't go well together.
No, it does not.
But in the gym, I don't know how well he boxed, but you can blow him over with his knees. The stories I've heard, okay? But he was the one who used to hold the bag. And he got the nickname
Squeeze.
Squeezer. So next time you go to the jazz festival and you go to Squeezer's, you'll see his picture pop up there. All right, and he was an interesting man.
Yeah, I bet.
He had great stories, and all the musicians you're talking about, they'd still call him,
Yeah.
you know him for years and years after.
And that's the other thing, once the club closes, again, people still are there, and people make those connections for life. Literally, they make it for life. And people ask, how's this person doing? How's that person doing? Like, if you're a musician, you just think you play your show, you move on, but they actually make connections with people in Rochester, and they'll still come back to funerals, they'll come back to weddings, shows. So again, the relationship is deeper than the music itself. It's making that bond because of the music. And so again, you won't see it. Unfortunately, you wish you could see it everywhere, but you definitely see it in jazz, and that's why, again, we want to make sure for our first class for the first semester here talks about the history of Rochester and jazz, and that's why we can't thank you enough for being a part of this with us. So thanks so much again.